Hello everyone. This video is part of our Prelims Approach 2024 series where we are discussing important topics and themes based on previous year question analysis. तो हम अलग अलग सब्जेक्ट्स में जो important themes है, जो topics है, जहां से chances है question आने के, वो हम discuss करते हैं इस series में. तो आज का जो topic है हमारा वो environment से काफी ज्यादा important है. It is about definition and classification of forests in India. And we'll focus on three types of forest, three classification of forest. The first is reserve forest, protected forest and deemed forest. Deemed forest अभी न्यूज में भी था, इसलिए it is very important. So we will start by looking at what are deemed forest, what is the origin of this term called deemed forest. So in 1996 there was this landmark Supreme Court judgment on environment. It was also called the Godavarman case. So in this judgment the Supreme Court expanded the definition of forest. तो अर्लियर क्या होता था, इससे पहले क्या होता था कि जो फॉरेस्ट है उसे कैटेगराइज किया गया था इनटू आइदर रिकॉर्डेड फॉरेस्ट और नोटिफाइड फॉरेस्ट. But Supreme Court took a different stand. The Supreme Court held that those forests which are either not in, which are neither in the recorded category or in notified category, but they have all the characteristics of forest, they will be considered as deemed forest. So basically Supreme Court ने क्या किया, it adopted the dictionary definition of forest. So it doesn't matter whether the forest land is in the category of whether recorded or notified or not, it will be considered a forest land if it has the characteristic, if it fits the dictionary definition of a forest. So Supreme Court expanded the definition of forest under this judgment. Now after the declaration of deemed forest, many state government they started notifying many forest lands as deemed forest. But before going into that, we will look into the two important categorization, that is the protected forest and reserved forest. तो ये कैटेगराइजेशन आता है इंडियन फॉरेस्ट एक्ट 1927 से. तो इस एक्ट के अंदर जो रिकॉर्डेड फॉरेस्ट है उसे थ्री कैटेगरीज में डिवाइड किया गया था: रिजर्व फॉरेस्ट, प्रोटेक्टेड फॉरेस्ट एंड अनक्लास्ड फॉरेस्ट. So unclassed forests are those forests which are not recorded by the government, either by the state government or central government. They are outside these records. They are considered as unclassed forests. We will focus on reserved forest and protected forest. इनके distinction पे हम लोग देखते हैं क्या इनमें differences है. तो अगर हम डिफरेंस की बात करें तो ऑल्दो बोथ रिजर्व फॉरेस्ट एंड प्रोटेक्टेड फॉरेस्ट आर लीगली प्रोटेक्टेड बाय द गवर्नमेंट, द डिफरेंस लाइज इन द लेवल ऑफ प्रोटेक्शन, द डिग्री ऑफ प्रोटेक्शन. ऑन द वन हैंड वी हैव रिजर्व फॉरेस्ट विच इज डायरेक्टली कंट्रोल्ड बाय द गवर्नमेंट, and then we have protected forest which is kind of looked after by the government. So the difference lies in the degree of protection. Reserved forests are more protected, the degree of protection is higher in reserved forest, whether it is a bit lesser in protected forest. And this can be made clear by looking into the activities which are allowed in reserved forests and not allowed in which are allowed or not allowed in these two categories of forest. तो अगर हम फॉरेस्ट रिजर्व फॉरेस्ट की बात करें तो यहाँ पे एक्टिविटीज लाइक हंटिंग, ग्रेजिंग, लंबरिंग, these activities are completely prohibited unless it is explicitly allowed by the government. इन activities को they are considered to be prohibited in reserved forest. वही दूसरी तरफ प्रोटेक्टेड फॉरेस्ट में ये एक्टिविटीज अलाउड होती है, जो आप ग्रेजिंग, लंबरिंग, ये सारे एक्टिविटीज अलाउड होती है फॉर द लोकल कम्युनिटीज. It is to ensure their livelihood. Basically, these communities reside in those areas which have been dependent on forest for centuries. So it is a rational idea to allow them to use forest resources, but up to only those that extent that it does not threaten the local ecosystem. ऐसा नहीं है कि hunting इतना ज़्यादा करने लगे कि कोई species जो है वो threatened हो जाए, endangered हो जाए. तो एक degree of protection यहाँ भी होता है. Next difference की बात करें तो purpose. The purpose of creating a reserve forest is to protect the resource present in that forest. ठीक है, तो उसके resources को protect करना is the purpose. On the other hand, the purpose of creating a forest area is to prevent further degradation of the forest area. And another difference is in the area. तो अगर हम इंडिया की बात करें तो according to the ISFR report, around 24% of total land area in India is classified as forest. So of those 24%, around 53% is considered to be as a reserved forest, whereas around 1/3 of that area is considered as protected forest, around 6 to 7%. One thing is important that it is needed to be noted here is that protected forests have lesser degree of protection and these forests are often upgraded to national park or wildlife sanctuary. अगर हम degree of protection की बात करें तो सबसे ज़्यादा जो protected होता है it is national park. It is national park, then comes wildlife sanctuaries, then comes your reserved forest and then protected forest. ठीक है, तो दिस इज द डिग्री ऑफ प्रोटेक्शन टू दिस फॉरेस्ट एरिया, दिस प्रोटेक्टेड एरियाज। तो ये अभी हमने देखा डिस्टिंक्शन बिटवीन रिजर्व फॉरेस्ट एंड प्रोटेक्टेड फॉरेस्ट। नाउ वी विल लुक अ बिट मोर इनटू डीम्ड फॉरेस्ट। So this was recently in news because in Rajasthan there is a forest land, it is called Oran land, it is also called Devban। तो ये क्या, ये एक sacred grove है। Sacred groves वैसे forest land को बोला जाता है which have some religious significance, some religious connotation। So the local community, they either associate this land with some local deities, that is why it is considered as sacred। And it is not just important from a religious point of view, it is also important from economic point of view। These communities, they are dependent on these sacred groves for forest resources। So in Rajasthan the government recently issued a notification जिसके अंदर ओरान लैंड्स को डीम्ड फॉरेस्ट डिक्लेयर किया गया था। तो वहाँ की जो कम्युनिटी थी, they started protesting because they are dependent on these ओरान lands, these sacred groves। And this is why deemed forest was in news, and it makes it important from examination point of view। तो अगर हम बात करें जो डीम्ड फॉरेस्ट है, दिस इज नॉट मेंशन्ड इन एनी काइंड ऑफ स्टैट्यूट। इट कम्स फ्रॉम, हमने देखा, इट कम्स फ्रॉम, ओरिजिनेट्स फ्रॉम द सुप्रीम कोर्ट जजमेंट ऑफ 1996। एंड दिस इज नॉट आइदर इट मेंशन्ड इन एनी ऑफ द स्टैट्यूट, वेदर इट्स इंडियन फॉरेस्ट एक्ट 1927 और द फॉरेस्ट एक्ट ऑफ 1980। इट इज not mentioned anywhere। And who has the question arises that who has the power to declare the land as a deemed forest? So the power is in the hand of state governments। तो जो जितनी भी स्टेट है, सबके अपने इंडिविजुअल पैरामीटर्स है जिसके बेसिस पे वो किसी भी फॉरेस्ट लैंड को डीम्ड फॉरेस्ट डिक्लेयर कर सकती है। बट ये डीम्ड फॉरेस्ट जो है, दे शुड बी आउटसाइड द परव्यू ऑफ आइदर रिकॉर्डेड और नोटिफाइड फॉरेस्ट। तो वो रिकॉर्डेड और नोटिफाइड नहीं होनी चाहिए, तभी उस फॉरेस्ट को डीम्ड फॉरेस्ट डिक्लेयर किया जाता है। और ये इंडिविजुअल पैरामीटर्स है अलग अलग स्टेट्स के। एंड दिस इज वाई इसके कारण इश्यूज और कंफ्लिक्ट क्रिएट होता है, बिकॉज देयर इज नो एनी ऑब्जेक्टिव डेफिनेशन ऑफ डीम्ड फॉरेस्ट। कोई साइंटिफिक डेफिनेशन नहीं है, सबके अपने अपने पैरामीटर्स है, सब्जेक्टिव पैरामीटर्स है, जिसके कारण जो कम्युनिटीज है या गवर्नमेंट जो फॉरेस्ट ऑफिशियल है, उनके बीच में कंफ्लिक्ट अराइज होता रहता है टाइम टू टाइम। व्हेनेवर गवर्नमेंट ट्राई टू declare a land as deemed forest, there are conflicts। ये ऐसा नोटिस किया गया है between the forest officials, government and the communities। तो आज के वीडियो में हमने देखा कि डीम्ड फॉरेस्ट क्या है। we also understood the distinction between reserved forest and protected forest। These three categories are important from prelims point of view। I hope you have understood it। मिलते हैं नेक्स्ट वीडियो में, तब तक के लिए keep watching Gen Study।